Welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we talk with hoteliers making a positive impact on the hospitality industry. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Peter Tudehope. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Brendon.
Peter, what I'll do is I'll start off by reading your bio because I like, obviously, our listeners to have a high-level understanding, and then we'll get into the questions and we'll get to know you a little bit better.
Fantastic.
So Peter Tudehope is an award-winning general manager of the Radisson Blue Plaza, Sydney. He's actually celebrating over 19 years with the hotel, having been appointed to the role in September 2005. Peter was also appointed as the regional manager for Australia and the Pacific of the Radisson Hotel Group, Australia Pacific, in January 2009. The Australia Pacific region, which Peter oversees, currently consists of 4 properties. That's the Radisson Blue Plaza, Sydney, the Radisson on Flagstaff Gardens, Melbourne, the Radisson Blue Resort, Fiji, Denarau Island, and the Grand Papua Hotel, a member of Radisson Individuals. Peter has an extensive background in hotels. He was a Director of Operations and Services for Radisson Hotel Group Asia Pacific. This led to him being charged with the growth and development of the group's brands, with a particular focus on Radisson. Peter joined Radisson Hotel Group from Four Seasons Hotel Sydney, where he'd served as the Executive Assistant Manager. Peter spent 12 years at this hotel. While managing the operation and financial environments, he steered the hotel through a number of phases, including asset management, receivership, change of management, change of ownership, and also a major refurbishment that involved closing the hotel for 4 months. This period also took Peter to Las Vegas and to Washington as part of the pre-opening teams for those Four Seasons hotels. Earlier positions included Rooms Division Manager and Front Office Manager when the hotel operated as the Regent. Peter was also the chairman of the Accommodation Board for Tourism Accommodation Australia, also known as the TAA, a division of the Australian Hotel Association for New South Wales for 9 years until April 2019. In 2022, Tourism Accommodation Australia New South Wales Awards for Excellence ceremony inducted Peter into the Hall of Fame. The prestigious Hall of Fame award recognises an individual for their continuous hard work, professionalism and dedication to the industry. Peter was awarded Australian Hotelier of the Year award at the HM Awards in September 2014. He's also won the Esprit General Manager of the Year in 2009 and has won the following awards for the Radisson Blue Plaza, Sydney. They include the TripAdvisor Award for Excellence in 2014 and 2013, the TAA Award for Outstanding Community Service and Achievement, the AHA New South Wales Redevelopment of the Year in 2011, the Carlson Hotel of the Year Asia Pacific in 2010, and the TripAdvisor Traveller's Choice Award in 2008, and the World Travel Awards Australia's Leading Business Hotel in 2008. It's quite an accomplishment. Welcome again, Peter.
Thank you, Brendon. Thank you.
I think I was just thinking about it. You must be getting close to Patrick Griffin's record as the longest-serving hotel general manager, I think, in Sydney.
Probably. What was Patrick's record?
That's a good question. I have to go back. I remember when I interviewed him, I could look at his notes, but he was at the observatory for, it probably was 20 years, maybe a little over. So you're probably getting pretty close.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So what are you saying, a bit too long?
No, I think consistency is probably something that we don't see enough of anymore, right? General managers, I've just noticed on LinkedIn today, there's been a bit of a shuffle in the Accor hotel managers around different hotels. So, after 18 months, 2 years, it's moving. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I think it's a little bit like a political term. You don't quite have enough time to actually really put your mark onto the hotel and improve it substantially. Whereas your property, you know it intimately, you've got that relationship with the owners that we talked about before. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Oh, and look, it's key, to a work-life balance because the industry itself doesn't offer it automatically. So if you can get into a situation where you can set yourself up in a hotel where you form a relationship really around trust, that's the key. When your owners start to trust you, you're given that empowerment to run the hotel as though it's your own business. And then it's a case of sitting in the middle between the management company and the owners and making sure that you're bringing both parties along at the same pace. That's been one of the great things that I've been able to achieve over the last 19 years here, which has been good for my family life and good for my work life. So that's good.
And good for the owners and the hotel as well. So, and that's acknowledged in the awards that the property has won. Lovely hotel. Peter, one of the first questions I always like to ask is, and that is, did you choose hospitality or did it choose you?
It chose me, I think. That's
Okay.
the right answer, Brendon. I left school and I remember my father saying to me, what do you want to do? And because I probably enjoyed school too much for all the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. I didn't have quite the marks to go off to university and do those sorts of things. And I said, I've got no idea. And he said, well, listen, I've got a friend who's got an opportunity for you to perhaps go out and work in a pub for 12 months and see how you go.
Yep.
He said, but, what about hospitality? And I said, oh, what, Dad, looking after other people, forget it. So he said then, why don't you go to the TAFE, which is up at the Darlinghurst in the old jail there. That was the only place you could actually do hospitality management. A guy called Kevin Roberts was heading it up back then. And I remember going into an interview with him and him saying to me, look, unless you go and work in the industry for 12 months, we're not interested in having anyone come through because the dropout rate was just so high. Kids were coming out of school thinking they'll try this out and, dropping out. So I said to my father, I'll take up that opportunity. So out I went to Blacktown, to the Blacktown Inn Hotel. So it was, the industry chose me, but once I got into it, I chose it.
Yep.
Probably the right answer.
And so from Blacktown, you went back and did the TAFE course. And then,
of course, I completed that. And I was very, very fortunate because I did the last 6 months at Ryde when it was a brand college. So we were 30 students that for 6 months had this brand new facility to ourselves. And so I was one of the first 30 students to ever use that facility and completed my diploma of hospitality at Ryde. And from there, I left and I sort of went down back to where I came from, which is in the country in Moss Vale. I worked in a guest house on a golf course for about 3 or 4 years. Ended up marrying the boss's daughter, as you do, try and get ahead. And then in 1985, when the Intercontinental in Sydney was opening, it's time now. I've got to go and do to the next stage. And that's what I did. So I came to Sydney in 1985 and joined Intercon as the night manager, doing nights. But I did that for about 2 years and I was able to work through, and I worked with an amazing general manager that opened that hotel, a gentleman by the name of Stefan Beaucamper. He and Ted Wright were sitting at the Regent, and the two of them were really the major GMs of the time. Back then in the 80s, the general managers of hotels were, that's where all the A-list events were held in these two big hotels. And, everyone wanted to know who the GMs were back in those days. And they were certainly very high-profile people. If you think back then too, Brendon, there was hardly a lot of hotels in the CBD back in 85. The Shangri-La hadn't been built. The Marriott just opened in 1989, which was opened as Ramada back then. There were so many hotels that have come on. The Westin didn't exist. No Park Royals. There was nothing over at Darling Harbour. The landscape back then was the Regent, the Intercontinental, the Boulevard Hotel, the Wentworth Hotel, and the Hilton. They were the big players.
Yes. The Boulevard back then was more of a five-star hotel than it probably is today. But
yeah, and it was always considered, as part of that group of 5 or 6 hotels that the business would be shared amongst. So interesting time. And then in 1990, I left the Intercon. I joined the Regent Hotel. I went across, and that was very much considered to be a trader, but I needed to move my career. Went across, joined the Regent, joined Ted Wright, and that was a great experience because, there was a lot of things in relation to, Intercon had been a bit of a trendsetter. They had opened the hotel with reception and cashiers being combined. I went across to the Regent, we still had separate receptionists and separate cashiers, and we had telex operators still at the Regent in 1990, which was just, when you think back today, we had people standing in front of telex machines as part of the business setup. And, my job was to combine all these, to bring the staffing levels into a bit more of a different line. And it was a great challenge and something I really enjoyed. And I was able to grow my career there. Then Four Seasons took over the management of the hotel from Regent in 1995. And then that opportunity to become the number 2 in the hotel was there. And a great experience, and one I really, really enjoyed, particularly being part of the team that was there as the official hotel for the Olympic Games in 2000.
Yes.
What a great experience that was, to be there and just to see every day. And one of the great memories I have is every day, Mr. Samaranch, who was heading up the IOC, would come down past the office and he'd hand me tickets every day to the events at Homebush. I lived in Homebush, so I would go home and pick up my family and go off to the Olympic Games every afternoon after work. It was just an amazing experience to have. But unfortunately, in 2002, the opportunity to go to Austin, Texas, they put that in for me for Four Seasons. I had to make that decision. I had, at that stage, my 4 children were in their teenage years, and was I going to pack them up and take them halfway across the world? And I said no to that because I said, there's just no point. One thing I was very keen to do was give them stability in their education. They've got something for them to grow on as time went on. So as a result of not taking that opportunity, I decided to leave Four Seasons because there's only one, and there still is today at this stage.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's when Radisson approached me. At that time, I brought the Regent brand. And because I had background in Regent hotels, they wanted me to come on board in their corporate office to help them grow and develop this brand, which was a nice concept. But anyway, the role expanded for a number of years, and then they decided to move the corporate office to Singapore. I said, I'm not going to Singapore. And they said, well, why don't you take over the Radisson in Sydney? And I said, absolutely. And so that's how the relationship started, and that's how I ended up being the general manager of the Radisson Blu in Sydney. And here I am 19 years later talking to you about it.
It's such a small world. I'm just thinking about the timing. So you would have worked with Kimberly Cohan,
I did.
I think, as financial controller. She was my boss at Horwaths.
Okay.
And she, after the pilot strike, Horwaths obviously downsized considerably. And she wanted me to come and work at the region, actually. But that's when I moved. I'd done some sort of adjunct work with the computer division at Horwaths. And I did the property management recommendation for what is now the Novotel Darling Harbour. And then I just found myself working for a PMS vendor. So it's interesting. I potentially could have been at the region as well, but I don't know why. It was just that, I suppose, desire to move into the tech side of things that had a pull on me. There you go.
And it's funny how these opportunities just come in your career, and you make those decisions, and they take you in a different direction. Because if you had said to Kimberly, yes, I'll go, who knows what you would have been doing today, Brendon?
I know. I think it was a position in stores or something, which is fine. Look,
yeah.
I started in stores as a trainee.
Absolutely.
So, Peter, is there a story or a memorable story from the early part of your career? It can be embarrassing, it can be funny, that sort of cemented your relationship or your love for hotels?
Yeah. I guess a story that stays with me that really cemented it was back in 1987 when I was working at the Intercon. I was a duty manager at that stage. I'd moved from night manager to a duty manager. And I had one of those days where if anything could go wrong, it did go wrong. It started at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I remember getting called downstairs to the car park where we'd had 2 guest cars, and the valet park drivers had crashed a Mercedes into a Jag, and I had to go up and tell the guests we'd damaged their cars. And from that, there was this lady standing at the front desk holding up this dress that she sent to the laundry, and we turned her ball gown into a mini skirt, and she was just beside, with this $3,000 dress we'd ruined. At about 10 to 3, I was just about finishing a shift. The hotel was fully booked. It was sold out, and there were 50 rooms waiting to check in. I'm thinking, what? So I went into the reservations. Of course, at those days, it was all paperwork, and I pulled out all this paperwork, and the reservations team had inputted the 10 and the 11 back to front. So they were arriving on the 11th of October, but we had them coming in on the 10th of November.
Oh.
Yes. So I had to spend the next 2 to 3, 4 hours trying to find, in those days with very few hotels and pretty full. So I had them spread out all over Sydney at that stage. I remember going home that night, and my father, who was a doctor, said to me, how was your day, son? And I said, oh, you don't want to hear about it. He said, no, tell me about it. So I sort of told him this story about all these things that had gone wrong. And he said, wow. He said, son, do you want to hear about my day? Yeah, tell me about your day. He said, well, at 4 o'clock this morning, I got called out because someone got hit by a train, and their head was over there and their body was over there. He said, from there I went into the hospital because a lady was miscarriaging, having triplets. And from there I had to deal with a burst appendix. He said, son, you're not saving lives. He said, if the worst thing that ever happens to somebody in their life is that their dress is ruined in a valet, they've had a fabulous life. And he said to me, take your job seriously, but never take yourself too seriously. And I've taken that with me my whole career. And that's what I pass on to all, up and coming managers. Take your job seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. We don't save lives.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I say the same to our team sometimes. It's like, we're not doctors. We always look after customers, but if we can't get back to them within, 5 or 10 minutes, it's not like someone's life is on the line.
Correct. And we often, Brendon, overcomplicate it. It's a pretty simple business.
Yep.
We seem to overcomplicate it for some reason. And if we keep it simple, it is a pretty straightforward and actually very enjoyable. It's when we try and overcomplicate it that we lose the enjoyment of it. And, the reality is we can never be in a situation, and I always say to my team here, if you're too busy for our guests, you're in the wrong business.
Yep.
Because the guests are our business.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So, and that's really the theme that we try and drive the hotel by. The guest is the center of everything we do.
Yep. Yeah. If it wasn't for guests, there would be no need for the hotel, no need for the staff.
Nothing.
That's it.
They pay the bills, basically.
They do. Peter, we may have even touched on it with what we've just spoken about, but is there someone who inspires you? And I know it's always hard. As you said, you've worked with a number of key general managers. Is there one more than the other that sort of inspired you and challenged you to be better in your role?
It probably happened a little bit later and more around 2009, 2010, Brendon, when I was sort of regional manager for the Southeast Asia Pacific. And at the time, the president of Asia Pacific was a gentleman by the name of Simon Barlow, and everyone knows who Simon is.
Yep.
And Simon was the sort of person that pushed you to levels that you didn't think you had.
Okay.
And at the time, you probably didn't like it. I didn't like it. I was thinking, this person's wanting more out of me than I can give. He wants blood out of a stone. But when I reflect back, if it wasn't for that push and that drive, I grew immensely in the short period of time I worked with Simon in my skill levels, in my ability to see bigger than just 4 or 5 hotels, but the industry in general, to be talking to people in so many different areas of hospitality, not just the operation accommodation side of it, but in development, the IT sphere, all of those things that I probably was a little bit limited on. He forced me to sort of, you have to get on board with this sort of stuff. And so I'm very grateful for that. I always found him to be the sort of person that he challenged you, and you just knew that every time you were dealing with him, you better know what you're talking about.
And it's not until, as you said, in hindsight, you can look back and say, oh my gosh, there was growth period. And we don't grow unless we're really stretched generally. It's like developing muscles. You've got to go and work out to gain muscle.
And it's important you take people out of comfort zones, because the longer we stay in those comfort zones. So I try and talk to myself every day about, you don't get into a comfort zone. Push, because if you sort of sit back and start being too comfortable, that's when you lose your focus, and that's when you don't achieve the goals you're trying to achieve. So
I love that. Peter, is there something that not many of your colleagues would know about you? Is there are you a ballroom dancer or computer programmer on the side, or?
No, I'm not, Brendon. I'm not a ballroom dancer or computer programmer. I'm a sports tragic, I've got to say. I love sport. I'm an avid West Tigers supporter, so I know how to lose because I watched my team do it for 2 years in a row. But I enjoy sport. I enjoy playing. I like the competitiveness of it.
Yep.
I often see the synergies between the work and sport. There are so many similarities, and one of the things you try and teach people as they become managers and leaders is that it's not about so much you being the star of the team anymore as being the coach that's able to get the team to perform to a level where it wins. And sort of that analogy sort of works with people because they immediately relate to a soccer team or something like that. And you start to see, if you've got players that are dropping the ball or missing the kick or missing the tackle, you've got to fix that, so that the team as a unit will function and you'll end up being a winner. So that's why sport and work have always gelled well for me, I guess. Yeah,
you're right. There's a lot of analogies, a lot of similarity in a team sport to any business.
Yeah, 100%. And you actually can almost tell when you when you sort of get a resume in front of you, and some of the times you look at that resume and you see that they play team sport,
Yep.
you can almost guarantee that they're probably going to make it for you. Whereas sometimes you get a resume and there's nothing that it's all about individual achievements, but nothing that's been part of a team. And there's always how you're going to fit into a team environment, because most times we're hiring people to go into certain teams of different sizes. So it is just one of those facets that I like to look at in resumes.
And as you said, it makes sense. There's no business that can have success, based on an individual. It's always a team.
100%.
It might be Tim Cook at the head of Apple, but there's a lot of people underneath him that are making Apple successful. So,
yeah, 100%.
On that note, is there a piece of advice you've been given over the years, and it might have been advice from Simon that we've already talked about, that's been important and you've sort of held on to that and taken it with you through your career?
Yeah. Ted Wright used to have a wonderful saying, Brendon. He said, if you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotten.
Okay.
So
yep.
That was his sort of mantra, to sort of always encourage you to keep learning. Never think you're at the point where you know it all, and always have that desire to want to continue to learn. And I think that's really the key to being able to have the longevity in a career in hospitality, is being able to continue to learn, because, like any industry today, it's changing dramatically.
Yes.
And, if we've got no desire to learn, or we think we'll just want the status quo to remain, we're going to be left behind. And that is the challenge, I guess, for us today. And that's something we've got to keep pushing, is, okay, if we're going to do things differently, if we're going to be asked by management companies or owners to do things differently, we've got to be in the mindset that we are up for that challenge.
Yep. The only thing that we can guarantee is that nothing, unfortunately, stays the same.
Yeah, so true. That is so true.
And as you said, if you put your head in the sand and, you're going to end up like Kodak or Blockbuster, times change and we have to be adaptable.
Yeah. And they're great examples of industry, companies that didn't they thought they could just keep doing what they were doing.
Well, the tragedy is that, a Kodak employee actually invented the digital camera, showed it to his boss. His boss showed it to his boss and he said, bury it. He said, if this gets out, it will ruin our business because we are in the business of selling film and this is not film. But if they had have had the mindset that they were in the business of actually helping people capture their memories, it could be on film or it could be digital. And I think it was it Konica? One of the Japanese companies, 2 years after Kodak had developed the digital camera, came out with it and put it on the market. But yeah, they had, and Blockbuster's the same. They had the opportunity to buy Netflix at a very reasonable price in the early days and just said, no, don't be silly. We can't see that ever being the case. When we're talking about sayings, Peter, I asked Kira before our interview today if there's a favorite saying that you had, and she said there is, and she said it is, hotels are like pizza. So what I've got here, I'll send it across to you. It is a T-shirt that actually says hotels are like pizza. It was quite interesting. Can you explain why hotels are like pizza?
And interviewing staff that have never worked in our industry, try and sort of give them an idea of what is a hotel all about.
Yep.
Most of them have no idea. They might have come in and used one area or another, but the whole logistics. So I describe it as a hotel is like a pizza. I said, and if you put the guest as the person that's going to experience this pizza, you start with the first slice of the pizza normally when they arrive at a hotel and they're met by the porter and their car's parked and the luggage is taken. If that goes well, that slice of the pizza is tasting pretty good.
Yep.
Go through the different disciplines of the check-in and, when they open the door to the guest room, if it's clean and well maintained. And then I talk about maybe an area where things don't go well. It might be food and beverage, where they have a bad breakfast experience. And I say to them, think about it. If one slice of your pizza doesn't taste any good, then the whole pizza's no good. And I said, we're all interconnected. All those slices are interconnected. We sell the total pizza. And we've got each department has to deliver on the guest journey for us to be able to get them to come back next week and buy another pizza.
Yes.
And it's easy for them to relate to. They all get it. They all work out that, they've got to be part of whatever it is department we're employing them in. They've got to be part of that guest journey. And I always say you can't have a fabulous housekeeping department and a really good food and beverage department, but an average front office, because it'll continually let you down on the guest journey. So that's the saying, and I probably say it too often these days because we're interviewing too many people, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
No, it's a good analogy, and I like, as you said, the fact that it's the whole pizza
Yep.
that is important. So everybody's role is critical to that guest experience. And if the guest doesn't have a great experience, they're not going to come back and buy another pizza. Definitely.
That's it. And that includes back of house people, because they all have to contribute to the performance of the people out the front. So, even if you've got a back of house role, you're still part of that pizza experience.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And we know housekeeping and engineering do have those back of house roles, but if a guest has an issue in the room, that detracts from their stay, and the cleanliness of the room is critically important.
Yep.
Peter, we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the industry as a whole now. One of the first questions I always like to ask is there a trend that we're seeing that either excites you or makes you a little bit nervous?
Certainly, from my perspective, Brendon, I think post-COVID, the industry has changed. We lost a lot of very seasoned and experienced staff across the industry. Some of them were in careers, some of them were just in jobs. But you take, housekeeping staff that have been 10 years doing their role, and that's probably just a job for them, but very experienced at doing what they're doing, and other duty managers and other managers that were wanting a career. They left, never to return. And that has left a hole, because the industry sort of got a bit of a reputation, I guess, as, well, if should something like this happen again, what's going to happen? Everything's going to shut down again. We're going to be able to work again. So a lot of staff went into industries where they had job security, like hospitals and nursing homes, and particularly those more manual tasks like housekeeping and stewards in kitchens and things like that, and engineering staff. So they have job security, because pandemic or not, those businesses are going to keep going. So we now have a situation where we're trying to rebuild our industry, where young people today see that this is a career. This is something you can actually grow a career in. We've got a number of fronts to battle in my mind. One is a lot of parents probably don't really see or want their children to perhaps go down this path. So mum and dad encouraging you to explore this avenue is probably not going to be that great.
Yeah.
So we have a role, and one of the things I'm very excited about is the accommodation division is working with government to try and get a grant for about $10 million to really revitalise the image of our industry, and to encourage young people to see it as a career, and to really put it back to where it was. Because I remember in 85 and 86 and 87, we were having people come into the industry that were getting, I guess, the equivalent of a Utah score of about 97 and 98. We were the industry to get into. It was very, very fashionable, people wanting to get in there. But now, that's not the case at all. So on that side, I can see it's important. I can see that hotels and management companies have a huge task in dealing with what they've got to try and improve on their abilities and skills and experience, because we've got a lot of people in big management roles, etc., with probably a lot less experience than you would normally want them to have to try and do these roles. A lot of management companies I can see now are realizing the best way to control this is to try and centralize a lot of the disciplines within a hotel, so that there's not as much need for that person in the hotel to have that, I guess, experience or knowledge on so many different aspects of the business. And it's also a way of controlling costs in what's becoming a very cost. Labour in our industry is probably the biggest cost to the business. Yep. So how do we try and balance all that without compromising on the overall performance and experience that a hotel is going to offer? So that's exciting on the side that now technology is being looked at in a far more rapid way, which should probably excite you too, Brendon. But it's a good thing, as long as it's not to the point where we take people out of the business altogether. It is hospitality at the end of the day. And, you can basically today, if you want to, almost go to a hotel, check in, stay, order food, check out, and not talk to anybody. that's in my mind can't be called hospitality. That can be called a bed factory or or whatever. But so how do we get the right balance between technology and people? I think a lot of management companies are grappling with it. We tend to very much model ourselves around what airlines do and airports do. We see them as sort of the ones that set up all these self check-in, check-outs, drop your own luggage off and all that sort of thing, and think, well, why can't we bring that into our business? And a lot of young people today are very conditioned not to have really experienced a lot of customer service. Because, you think about it, we go to Coles and we self-check in our groceries now. We go to the bank and we talk to an ATM in the wall. And so we don't deal with people a lot. And I remember I hired this receptionist just after COVID, and she said to me, we had this meeting where we talk about ideas and how we can make things better. And she said, would it be possible to put a little thing on the desk where the guests can text me what they want and I can text back so I don't have to talk to them? And I said, well, we possibly do it, but I don't know whether that's the hospitality we actually want to offer at this stage.
Right.
So, and again, because they're so more comfortable, a lot of these people, with the technology, the idea of talking to somebody maybe twice their age at the desk is a bit intimidating. And so if you can text me, I feel far more better to deal with you.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of balancing to do, but it is exciting. And certainly some of what's out there as far as technology, and you know better than me, is also very exciting, as far as what it can do and how well it can do some of the tasks that we have people doing today. So it will evolve without a doubt. How far it evolves, how much we go in a direction that takes more and more people out of our business, I'm not sure.
I think the word that you hit on there, Peter, is balancing, getting that right balance. And as much as I love technology, I always say to people that it's not the answer to every problem, and that we should always offer a guest choice. Unlike the airlines, supermarkets do it to a certain extent now. You can go through self-checkout, or you can, still queue and talk to someone. And, I'll do a bit of both. My daughter would always say, let's do self-checkout. And it's like, no, I've got too many things. I'm going to go and I'm happy to say hello to the 16-year-old that's there and have a bit of a chat. Likewise, there is technology now, which I don't see many people using. At Woolworths, you can actually, particularly if you've got limited items, scan those items, put them directly in the bag, and then present your phone to a reader and check out directly. So my wife does that, only with half a dozen items. And we actually used it last Saturday because, we got to Woolworths and it's like every man and his dog was there because, the shops weren't open on Good Friday. And so it's just like, all right, let's do that. And it's very convenient. And I'm surprised that a lot more people don't use it.
Yeah, right.
So I think my point is, as an industry, we just need to make sure that we offer guest choice. And I always say that, even in automation, and I've seen hotels do it well and some do it poorly, where they sort of they force the guest to use a tablet, for example, to turn the bedside light off. And, the guest has jumped into bed, they don't have their glasses on. They're like, I just want to turn the light off. I really don't want to spend 10 minutes trying to navigate this tablet. And I've heard stories of guests just going to the bathroom and getting a face washer and actually just removing the globe because it was easier than trying to. And my view is, it's great to have the tablet, but have a light switch. You can have both. They can both exist, particularly at the moment.
I think a story that really tickles my fancy a little bit is a hotel that had installed in their bathrooms these electronic toilet seat openers and closers and whatnot. And then I was talking to the GM one day and he said to me, I've got 2 rooms out of order because we can't get the toilet lids to open. You've got a room out of order because you can't get the toilet lid to open. So sometimes simple is best. Do we really have to pander to the point where you have to press a button to lift the toilet seat up? I'm not sure.
Sometimes it's a nice gimmick, but having that fail safe that if the button's broken, you can still open the toilet seat and sell the room. I suppose the guest has to do a room move because they need to go to the toilet in a hurry, or they run downstairs to use the lobby. That's not good. That's not good service. I suppose talking then around technology, What is one of your biggest learnings over the years in relation to technology?
Wow. Yeah. As I alluded to at the beginning of our talk, Brendan, when I walked across to the Regent Hotel, we had telex operators, and I walked into our telephone room and we had probably 4 telephone operators in the morning shift, 4 in the afternoon shift, and 2 overnight. In my reservations department, we probably had 7 or 8 people taking reservations, and the fax machine was the latest item that was bringing all the business into the hotel. And you thought, wow, and I thought, this is amazing. And then you just saw the technology come in and gradually either they disappeared completely, like things like telex operators, and those just disappeared. The way business was done in the reservations department started to change completely. The fax became almost a thing that just sat in the corner, hardly being used, as more and more of technology drove our business, online and whatnot. Our telephone operations streamlined. So you could see everywhere you turned, technology fine-tuning the business for the better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it was more efficient, more thorough. There were still people involved, but not the quantity of people you needed there. And I remember the Regent Hotel in 1990 when I joined them, I think we had 138 staff members just in the front office alone.
Wow.
And include concierge and different shit. That was enormous. It was just enormous. And we had separate cashiers, as I said, and separate receptionists. So, the whole way that thing was structured was just enormous. And just to see how we're able to, with the advancement of technology, bring it down, but never compromise the guest experience as we're doing, only improve it. And that to me is what it's all about. It's being with the technology, being able to assess it, and then bringing owners along for the ride as well. Because, at times we're talking serious money when you want to introduce serious change and make it better for the business in the long term, whether the owner is quite prepared to do it. And often you're talking to owners that don't have a lot of technical skill or don't have a lot of knowledge around technology. And sort of being able to get them to buy into this is really important, because they can make or break it for them. And ultimately, they don't see the long-term disadvantage if they don't do it. They just see the short-term, that's a lot of money for me to put this new PMS system in or to try this new technology that you're wanting to put into place. So again, I think post-COVID, we've got to move a little bit more quickly than we were. I think we were all sort of standing around pre-COVID saying, oh, that's nice. And that's interesting, but weren't really doing much about it, you know what I mean? And now we're saying, that's nice, and is it really work? And let's give it a go, and let's trial it, and let's see if we can make it happen. So there's more of an urgency today than there was pre-COVID.
Yeah. I like the way that you said, obviously, the fax machine was moved out of the business, and you integrated, obviously, the receptionist and the cashier role, but at the same time, there was only a positive impact on the guest experience. And I think that's the way that we need to, use technology generally. It's always got to improve the guest experience. It should never diminish. And if it's going to keep it the same, then do we really need it? There's always got to be a benefit, I think, both for the guest and the operation of the hotel.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, look, hotel companies are now going into different styles of hotels. We've got what we call lifestyle hotels. And I guess we're trying to almost set up a structure that certain brands might be for certain age demographics and other brands but I don't think that's the case at all. I think people are people. And at the end of the day, whether you're 20 or 80, there are certain things you want. 20-year-old and 80 still want interaction with people. They just do it differently, that's all.
Yes, that is true. Peter, as we get ready to wrap up, the last question I always like to ask is, if there's somebody who's either contemplating or just about to start their career in hospitality, what advice would you give them?
Wow. I'd say the world's their oyster, Brendon. The industry is really crying out for people that want a career. So, it's about, in my mind, persevering. You're always going to have setbacks in your career, and you're going to be looking at opportunities and think, oh, I didn't get it. I always have a saying, one door closes, another door opens.
Well,
so you just got to take that in your stride. Become resilient. Don't just fall in a heap as soon as something doesn't quite go the way you want it to. Because if you can do that, your career will just make its way. And sometimes make a left field decision that sort of takes you out of your comfort zone. And you'll be surprised how quickly you'll be able to move into that role and then move on to whatever it is that you ultimately want to get to. And keep learning. One of the things that we do with the students here, and I say to them, every day you come to work here during your internship, or if you're working part-time with this, you're working with people that it's just a job, but for you, it's a career. So if you're working with somebody that's, a food and beverage attendant, that's just here to put the bread and butter on the table at home, they've got a different approach to the role that you're going to have.
Yes.
They want to run the business. So you've got to think differently. You've got to work differently. You've got to be able to bring that person up to your level, not for you to come down to their level. And every day, go home and write in a book somewhere, the thing I learned today that had a positive impact on you, and the thing today that you learned that didn't have quite the same impact. And I said, once you start getting into that habit, you'll start to realize quickly the sort of management style you're going to develop as you grow in your career, because you're going to remember when you were the food and beverage attendant, what you didn't like and what you did like about the way you were being dealt with by management and leadership in particular properties. And hopefully that's the advice I would give anyone.
Yep.
Try and be successful in it. There's great opportunities. The industry is going to continue to grow and evolve.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to say, I've got to keep learning it. You don't just finish a course or, go to these colleges and come and think that's all I have to do now. No, you keep learning. You keep on learning. And different management companies, we all do run hotels pretty much the same way. We just do it with different bells and whistles, as I say. But, the ability to move across the different management companies is not that difficult. But they've all got something to offer you, and you've got to work out what it is. And as you're going up in your career, learn to manage your manager is the key to success.
Yep.
Because if you know how the person that manages you ticks and how they operate, and you can manage that, you're going to be far more successful than waiting for them to manage you.
I love that. There's some great advice there, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, I've enjoyed it too, Brendon. Thanks for inviting me along to have a chat with you.